right, we're gonna get started with another episode of Wildlife at the Crossroads Podcast. I still have a little trouble getting that out there, just because
That takes a while for some people.
I'm so used to saying the wildlife management program that when I get into the wildlife, I want to say management program, but it's Wildlife at the Crossroads Podcast. I will say yesterday I had a meeting with the ladies from the workforce division, and they mentioned the podcast, and we're so excited that we are doing something like this. And,
awesome.
They said it looks great. And they're just, happy that, we're doing something like that. They didn't know about it until they saw it pop up on their feed. So I had sent out an email to staff and faculty they didn't see it that way. They saw it organically just by scrolling, and they're like, oh, what is this?
So they don't check their email, huh?
Either that or they have my email blocked, which I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people do that, so.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
So I just wanted to pass along that information. Plus, also, I did communicate. I talked to Oscar Acuna Garcia, or Oscar Garcia Acuna, via Facebook, and he posted a really nice comment about how he loves the program, and he, is so grateful and appreciative of everything that he learned here.
Yeah, he graduated from the program,
and so we went back and forth, and he's basically offered his services in the sense of, like, if there's anything I can do for the program, let me know. And I said, well, it'd be good to bring you in as a former student, and
absolutely, to have him here.
And so he said, anytime, just let me know, and I'll make a trip down there or up there, because he's down south. So
right.
So yeah, I just wanted to get that information out there to you guys, because I think it's important to let everybody know how the podcast is doing. So, all right, so we have a theme for. I'm looking at it right now. Episode 3 theme. So we're going to be talking about activities.
Yep.
Activities that students are doing, and y'all are going to, I'm assuming, elaborate on these certain activities.
Yeah, we're really excited about this episode, because this is what our program's all about, is having, the things that we do outside the classroom, in the field. And so that's how Bob, wanted to build this program. It's very important, because you can learn, you can teach students or people things in the classroom, but having them out there in the field, being involved, where they actually see it, that's very valuable. And honestly, that's really how I can learn. I can read things, but I've got to actually get out there to understand it. I'm a visual learner, so I really enjoy being out in the field, and I know Daniel does too.
Definitely. Well, and the things that we do, they're really life enriching. A lot of students, it may be the only chance that they have to do some of these activities. Like being able to touch deer the size of what we're touching, 200 plus inch deer, very, very big, beautiful animals. And so very unique process there.
Okay, so I guess we just jump right in. There's no sense in delaying this anymore. So the first bullet point I got here so are these in chronological order as far as how
close.
The fall semester goes?
Yeah, pretty close. That first bullet is. And so within the first 2 weeks, we're going to be cutting antlers off at a ranch just north of town. And so what that is it's a breeding operation. And to keep those bucks safe within those tight confines of the fence.
Meaning that's the purpose for doing the antler cutting.
Right. We'll cut antlers off of those bucks. And so it's a great opportunity for students, because within the first 2 weeks of class, they're already getting experience touching animals. And that's something that a lot of other colleges don't have a chance to do until they're juniors. And they're doing it in the first 2 weeks of their freshman course.
Yeah, it's pretty significant, because you think about it, these large universities, they've got they've got more students and not as many activities, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so those juniors and seniors, they're finally have this opportunity to get out in the field, where we've got our first year students, freshmen, jumping in and having an opportunity to participate in. And it's also a way we use that activity to help kind of break the ice for our students too, because we've got our first years and the students are quiet and they're shy. And so that's where we really start to get a feel and see the students' personalities come out when they're really involved and working the deer there at the ranch. And so it's fun to watch those students. And so, on that particular activity, we're working a couple of nights, working a couple, let's say 150, 200 deer, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to watch the students, because they're actually there holding the deer and working with the ranch staff and having a good time while they're working the deer through the chute.
So can you just go through an average day of working with the deer in the pens? I mean, so if y'all are working at night, are y'all still in class during the day, or do they take a break in between and then meet up again later that evening, or how's that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's a great question.
Just run through the day.
They basically work their deer after dark, okay? And that's a time where most people consider deer to be gentle, more gentle, at least capable of being moved through the facility. And the guys that get there about 6 or so or what have you, and the nice thing is they're fed. The rancher's really kind to them on that aspect, and they get prepared. And I'll let the guys talk about what they actually do. But the thing that I want to reiterate is the fact that these are licensed deer breeding operations that we work with, okay? And there's certain specifications they got to follow, certain procedures they got to conduct to test for certain things, for various diseases or what have you, or just if an ear tag falls off, it's got to be replaced within a certain amount of time, because they all have an identifiable ear tag on them. These deer are actually still wild deer, and will be released in the future into the wilds of Texas. But more importantly, once they're in confinement, they're under this permit, so they have to perform all these things. Whereas we have students that go through that procedure, and those that impress those landowners the most are actually asked back and paid to conduct activities later, whether they're doing anything from testing pregnancy rates to separating does from their fawns and things of that nature. So this exercise that they're about to tell you about is just a minor player in the overall scheme, the holistic scheme of the thing, because there's a lot of activities, paid activities, that these youngsters get and gain valuable experience, and sometimes jobs, many times jobs, in this propagation arena. But go ahead and tell them about your activity.
Yeah, absolutely. But and then I wanted to, I guess, mention all of our activities we're blessed to work with some great landowners, and so that's what this, without the landowners, we wouldn't be able to have the opportunities and activities that we have in this program without the landowners. And so we're really thankful for and blessed to work with a bunch of great group of people. But on this particular ranch, that's the key is, especially with this activity, but with everything else, the exposure, right? So we have the deer working through the facility, and so we're obviously focused on cutting the antlers, but then there's the other aspect where Bob mentioned, where the deer have to be, tagged, and so they get to see that process and have that understanding, where a lot of students don't have that exposure. So it's something completely new, right? And so they, I think everybody has this focus on where they have a tunnel vision, where they only see what they and think about what they've exposed to. They have no idea what else is out there, right? So this, hopefully, this first opportunity out in the field, a couple of nights, gives those students, kind of lift their blinders. Okay, they're like, whoa, there's a lot more out there, and there really is. And so having those students, and that's where we want students to kind of get out of their shell. We want the students to be involved in every facet while they're out there on the ranch, whether they're helping move the deer into the barn, or whether they're sorting, helping the ranch manager, or holding the deer while they're in the chute, or giving shots, what have you. So be involved in every aspect. That way they kind of have an understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, and one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is mentoring the students through every activity. And I feel like the ranch staff there does a really great job of, we have a meeting before we start the activity, and they go through some of the things that, can make a student successful. The things, the do's and don'ts.
We actually start the whole procedure out with a prayer.
Yeah. Exactly. And, I think that ranch staff does a great job of mentoring the students, trying to get them to do different things of the different components, because there's a lot of steps. You got to get deer up from the pen into a working facility that's air conditioned and it's dark. And so you have to have good communication. And there's like a flow of progress of deer running through that facility all the way to the chute where we're going to be handling them. And there's different steps along the way. And ranch staff do just a great job explaining that to the students, and working with students, and also haggling them a little bit, having some jokes and some fun along the way.
So I don't know, did we get through what happens in that day specifically?
No.
So they show up in the morning, regular class time?
Right, we've got our classes, and then, we expect, obviously, the students to be there, right? So, it's like a job. You've got your classes, whether it's wildlife or whether it's the basic courses they're taking. They need to be there at all their courses. And then they, obviously, if they've got an internship, then they need to take care of the responsibilities there. And then we'll meet up here at the building in the evening, 6 o'clock, like Bob said, and then head out there. And last year, the past couple of nights that we were there, we worked till about 1 o'clock in the morning. So then we wrap up everything, get back here a little after 1, and then we've got class usually at 9 o'clock.
Wow. That's a
following morning.
And one thing that we pay attention to, and even that the ranch pays attention to, is who shows up on class on time.
Yep.
Because just like our students having to show up to class, they have to show up to work, make sure those deer are still alive or doing good after being handled, that they don't need to medicate anything or anything of that nature. And so they expect students to do the same. And if they show that hard work and good work ethic, then they're going to be the students that are going to get hired.
Yeah.
That they're looking to first to be hired.
So what's the process? I mean, there's a special tool they use for the antlers, to cut off the antlers, right? I mean, it's not just like a hacksaw or a sawsaw.
No, it's
what is that called? It's a
Well, they have their own. You want to talk about it, Bob?
Well, no, they have a wire. Most of the time in the field, we're using a handheld wire saw, and it cuts pretty good. Some people use different configurations, whether it be saw blades, just like you'd cut a board, what have you. But basically, a wildlife biologist is going to be dealing with that. He's going to be using a wire cable in most instances. So I'm not saying that's the fastest way, but that's one of the ways we could actually cut underneath the burr, the very base of the antler, and
so
for some
right
people that right around this, you could cut right around here, because this pedestal, that's what adheres to the skull itself.
So how were these cut? Were these cut or were
these are shed antlers?
Sheds, okay.
Yeah. But it depends on the operation.
For those people who might not know, what exactly is it? Is it a?
So it's a steel cable,
metal, right?
Steel cable, So it's a steel cable, and so
so does it have? It doesn't have like little
no blades to it, but it's like a wire.
It's a
file.
wire steel
okay.
cable.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's really rough.
Yeah.
And as you pull it, and our students, it'll crack you up because I've got pictures of youngsters. They're pulling that thing so hard, and it starts smoking.
No, I've seen it.
you know,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the videos.
puffing up smoke, and it's hilarious. And
'Cause it's an arm
sometimes
workout.
they'll snap.
Yeah.
Oftentimes these cables will snap.
The cables.
Because our
themselves.
youngsters, some of them are pretty big young men, and
They put some
they're
weight
after it.
behind it.
But the gals like doing it too.
Oh yeah, I've
That's
seen.
one thing. Everybody participates.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to mention, in most often the cases that we deal with people when we're handling deer for them for an evening, is they will watch our students, and at the end of that, we might be doing this for a 3-day project, 3-evening project, and like Dean said, up till late hours of night. And on the last day, the students that the landowner or his managers feel are most competent or demonstrated the most competency are allowed to handle everything. They run the whole show. And that's really cool because that is one where the monkey's on their back now. And they're pretty good at picking the youngsters that exercise that or demonstrate that.
I have
ability.
one question. This is a serious question. It's an important question.
It'll be a first time, but it'll go.
Y'all say y'all are out there till 1 a.m. When you say you all, is it Dean, Daniel, students, and Bob?
No, it's Dean and Daniel.
Oh, okay, that's what I
did
was
it for 15 years,
Oh, okay.
and
I see.
my
You're all for good behavior.
Yeah, I got fired. Let's say that. But
Yeah, I was
but
just
no, I'm not going to go out there anymore. Although I'm maybe out on other operations that late.
Yeah.
But for various
'Cause
reasons.
that's way past your bedtime, Bob.
Oh, I don't know. The older you get, the less you sleep.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I thought
that's
it
a
was the
fact.
other way around,
No,
that the
it's
older
not-
you
no,
get, the
no.
more you sleep.
No, the more you
No.
sleep,
It just can come at
doesn't
any
work
hour
that
of the
way.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really fun out there, and they use the cable saws, and they also have this this grinder. It looks like a handheld grinder, but it has a special blade attached to it to help. They also use that to cut the antlers off as well, and so
Yeah.
and so the students are using the cable saws and holding the deer, and so it's a really a great opportunity for our students to get out there. And so once we get that activity out of the way, we've got some we just keep on moving. Our fall is our busiest semester, and so once we wrap up the antler cutting, then we move on, and we've got our wildlife ID class that Daniel leads, and so it's a great opportunity where students go out every week to a different ranch. And so you want to talk about that, Daniel?
So are you talking about the field IDs?
Yes.
Field ID.
Well, before we move on to that one, I know there's some other points here. So other activities that happen with deer in the pens, vaccination, testing, artificial insemination.
And so based on the performance of the students, really from that antler cutting, ranch personnel have a good idea of who they'd like to invite back.
Yeah.
And there's other things that we can do throughout the year. So in November, that's typically when a lot of ranches want to do artificial insemination. And there's a couple steps to that. You have to get all your does in time to come in and cycle at the same time. And so a lot of times you have to have a lot of hands to help you, and that's where our students come in to help. And so they'll implant a cedar into all the does, and that helps them get on their time, and then they have to remove that cedar.
Explain cedar first. Some that might not know what that means.
You may do a better job of explaining it.
Well, so what we're trying to do is called synchronizing the does into estrus. And so they've got a cedar placement. It's inserted vaginally, and then they also give them a shot. And so it's usually it's either prostaglandin or estrogen. I think it's prostaglandin, I believe, off the top of my head. And so they have to do this, I think twice, I believe. Once initially, and then a follow-up. And so that allows, they almost can synchronize the does up until the nearest hour, basically. They got it down to a science.
Wow.
And so the students help them do this, and so that's what's really really great behind the scenes. So it's not where the students get to go out. It's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. That's not the case. A lot of times when they have to synchronize the does, they're there at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Because that's just when it happens.
Mm-hmm. So that way, when they need to AI those does, the veterinarian that usually does the AI is there around, they're ready around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So it's not you could say banker's hours when you're doing that type of
shift
work.
Basically.
It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
And then during the rut, the vets will come in and they'll collect semen, off the bucks.
Yeah.
And students are privy to that activity as well to enjoy opportunity or experience rather of watching a professional conducted, so that someday they may be veterinarians themselves or an individual that's professional enough to conduct the same activity.
My uncle, he worked at a ranch, a deer breeding ranch. It's right there, right out, headed to going to La Praya, right on the other side of the Nueces. I can't remember what the name of the ranch is, but so he'd tell us that the owner of the ranch, and I can't remember what his name is, but he would buy little, what are the test tubes, vials of straws of semen,
Yes.
and they would ship them in, and it was like, it was like gold. They were bringing it in. It was in a case with,
Liquid
it was
nitrogen,
refrigerated. It was cooled, and it was packed to where it's not gonna fall and break or whatever. And so everybody was. So there was like I guess the owner would call and say, hey, there's a shipment coming in. So they prepare to make sure and get it, bring it in, and I said, really, is there that? Well, mainly because it's expensive.
Right.
So sometimes it was $250,000.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, they get up
ones.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, we're in the wrong business, boys.
Yeah.
It can be very expensive. Yeah.
So you have your vaccination. So what kind of vaccinations are they doing to the deer?
Yeah, so
or
typical
giving the deer?
vaccinations, it's kind of like livestock. There's going to be things in our region that you want to annually vaccinate for. Like with livestock, giving an 8-way is typical. And so it's kind of like a Clostridium shot for, those things. But anthrax is another one that you want to get vaccinate for. And so anytime that you have animals in hand, you want to be giving those vaccinations anytime that you can.
So now going back to the weekly trips that y'all do for field IDs, elaborate on that.
Yeah, and so that starts the very first week class. That first Tuesday, we're going to be in the field. And that's when you start getting an idea of how to evaluate rangelands. We're looking at a lot of different plants, grasses, forbs, and brush. And it's that repetition through the semester that they're going to gain that ability to evaluate rangeland. But the first time that we come up to a plant, we're going to spend some time on it, really focus on it. But then that's when the speed starts. That's when repetition of seeing that same plant over and over again starts. And through Bob's design of that class, we start getting faster and faster as the semester goes. And we'll walk through the brush. We'll pop some brush toward the end, and it kind of lets you know what students are wanting to learn.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are always on my hip, I kind of have an idea. It's like, okay, they're thirsty for it. They're hungry for it. And it's a fun class.
Yeah, and that's our first.
Class.
It's a class for our freshmen, our first years,
Yeah.
and so because that's an important class in the field wildlife management, because if you're going to manage deer, you're going to manage quail or wildlife in general, you've got to have an idea of the plants that they're consuming or maybe they're avoiding. And so Daniel does a really good job talking about, as we go through those plants, how the value, if they're good, are they bad, are they good for wildlife, good for livestock, are they poisonous to livestock? And so how the class is designed, Bob did great, where it's repetition. So you see those plants, a lot of plants like mesquite over and over, but hey, you might see mesquite that's 20 foot tall, and you could see a mesquite that's just sprouting, that could be, because we've got like a lot of mesquite beans right now, right? We get some rainfall, they're going to start sprouting. And so students get to see those different, what we call growth forms. So it could be short, it could be tall. And so that's very valuable because you get that constant exposure over and over. It's not just seeing that plant one time, and you got to remember, when did I see that plant? Was that 3 or 4, 5 weeks ago, And
so are they learning the scientific name to it?
Scientific names, are learning those in class.
Yeah.
And then we complement that by going in the field.
So it's not just like mesquite, oak, Bermuda grass, I don't know, whatever else is out there.
Yeah.
I'm
Weeds,
assuming you'll have to identify weeds.
Yeah, a lot of forbs.
A lot of forbs, yeah. So those are actually really very valuable for deer and for wildlife and quail as well. So
to consume, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and the seeds they produce too are very important for quail.
Yeah.
And but we tend to focus on a brush species because that's an important forage component for deer, and we focus on deer quite a bit in this program. Obviously, they're most important wildlife species as far as from a monetary standpoint here in the state. So we focus on white-tailed deer and the food they consume, and they consume quite a few brush species, and so we focus on that, but we also bring in the grasses and the forbs.
When feeding, I guess, or worrying about making sure that your deer and whatnot have plenty to eat, so do ranchers or property owners, do they supplement with anything like grain or oats or corn to help with the, maybe like in times of drought?
Bob, you want to talk about that?
No, I think they do in a variety of ways. Whether it's they'll mechanically work their brush to augment the development of the various species in earlier successional stages, but they'll also use a product, a supplemental feed source. They can range anywhere from 12% crude protein all the way up to 25, 23, 24% crude protein. And so it's a pellet format, and it's distributed all over it's actually hard to find a place that doesn't supplement anymore.
Yeah.
It's a very popular tool.
I would imagine you don't want to put all your eggs in the "I hope it rains" basket.
Well, in South Texas, you have weather conditions that are usually negative when it comes to rainfall.
Yeah.
As we are now, we're considerably dry, and when it gets really harsh, the brush will go into a state of dormancy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it's got to protect its roots. That's where it's going to keep it alive. That's what keeps it alive, and the vegetation of that same plant above ground is actually dead. So it's of no real value. It's roughage, and they can consume it, but they're not getting anything out of it because the major form of growth is off the post-meristem tissue, which is on the very terminal ends of the brush or anything that's growing out there. And that's where all the crude protein is building live parts of the plant. And But the supplemental feed is one way in which you could augment or help assist deer and a variety of other species, because there's everything from non-game birds to you name it, consuming that pellet and help them during rough times. So pellet, artificial deer pellet is a good form of to help all wildlife.
Yeah, and another supplemental feed that's really common in our areas is cottonseed.
Yep. And why is that, Daniel? I mean, let them know a little bit about cottonseed.
Yeah, so cottonseed, it has the crude protein content, but it's also high in fat.
Yeah.
and so it helps put on pounds.
I must be eating a lot of cottonseed because
Yeah, and so it just brings another element to it that really helps steer out.
I didn't look at
especially
it that
coming-
way, Giz, but that's, I mean, you know,
It took a little while,
I
Bob. It
noticed
took a
that
little
our
while to-
cottonseed supply was
Yeah.
dwindling, and
Yeah, well,
I was
you
just
know.
wondering where it was going.
I put it on salads.
But I have to agree,
Put it
it's
on salads.
very effective.
Yeah,
I mean,
put it on
it's,
salads.
it's
and,
working
you know,
good. Yeah,
in my tacos
Yeah.
every once in a while.
nothing wrong with that.
So yeah, I mean we're
But it's high. That cottonseed is high in protein, and it has a lot of, like what Daniel said, high energy
right.
in it. A lot of energy. So it's a good feed source for particularly bucks coming out of the post rut,
Yeah.
and does coming in just before they drop because they've got the lactate. They need to be under a high nutritional regime to produce enough milk for that youngster. But it's also important that the non-target species are not overly attracted to
Oh, okay.
cottonseed. That's a big thing. If I'm on a small place and I'm trying to feed animals, well, if I'm feeding a deer pellet and everything wants it, particularly
Yeah.
feral swine, javelinas, the whole
raccoons.
cadre of wildlife out there, raccoons. Well, I've got to build a fence. I got to spend more overhead to deal with these collateral species, and I don't want to do that. I mean, that's an added expense and more man hours. Cottonseed, you're more apt to put that out in just cages.
Mhm.
You know, it's a loose seed source that you could pile up into a circular cage of, say, 4 foot in diameter, and I've seen some 5 and 6 foot in diameter
Yeah.
cages where they just drop the seed in there, and works very well, and it somewhat eliminates the competition animals have with other species because, like I said, feral hogs don't really gravitate to it unless conditions are extremely, really bad.
Yeah, no, this makes a lot of sense because I've seen different outfits, farm stores and whatnot. They sell. It's like, oh, you have cottonseed. I'm like, oh, is that for like are they planting cotton with that? It's like, but no, I know, it's for that. So, deer management permit (DMP) captures. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So we that's probably one of the bigger highlights of our semester. Through Bob's consulting business, we're able to do 4 to sometimes even 5 captures per year. And so basically what that is, it has to be a high fence property. And they can apply for a permit through Parks and Wildlife. And they have to have these pins approved by Parks and Wildlife personnel. And then once they go through that approval process, then we can put one buck with up to 20 does into a single pen for breeding purposes, try to augment the genetics of that property.
But
And
temporarily. I mean, we don't keep
temporarily.
them in there very long.
Exactly. And so we tend to do these captures October, November, kind of in the cooler months before the breeding season starts. And then we'll tend to release them February, March. How far can they go to the following year?
Oh, they go all the way through September. There's a deadline to release, and it goes by the eco-region.
Right.
But in our region, September, October. But, the thing about that is, depending on when you do it, you have a certain time period you can't capture after following that time period. So you got to be careful about that. But these animals are just temporarily put into a pen that's no smaller than 5 acres, and has to have about a little over 50,000 square feet of cover in it.
Mhm.
And you can put artificial cover roofing in there if you had to. So there are some restrictions and things like that. I prefer to let the deer go prior to parturition, prior to birth,
Mhm.
birthing their fawns, simply because these fawns know more about that ranch
Yeah.
than we do, and they could go right back to where
Yeah.
they've had fawns before. And I personally feel that you will ensure more successful survival of those youngsters. But it's a very unique tool, and it's used to augment the development or increase the probability of improving the antler quality, size, based on the Boone and Crockett scoring system on a particular ranch through the genetics of that particular buck that you selected and captured for the breeding facility or pen.
Yeah, and the reason why that some ranches tend to focus on having DMPs is because under natural breeding, across the ranch, a buck's not going to breed very many does. It's just not going to happen. It's not the the traditional thinking is, well, the largest buck is going to breed all the does. That's not the case. So young bucks and older bucks can all do the breeding, and so. In an effort to focus on enhancing the genetics across the ranch, that's why the landowners look at having a DMP. And so when we're out there, it's really fun because the students are, we get to work with their wild deer. They are they're brought into us by the helicopter, and so. It's exciting, especially when the buck is brought into us, and so the students are, that's a large buck, and so it's probably a lot of students the largest buck they've ever seen alive, on the hoof, and so the students get to work with that deer where we have to take the net off the deer, we age the deer. And so then we also have to take some measurements of the antlers, and then those deer are that buck, and then we bring in the does later on, and so those are, I guess you could say, right afterwards, not later on, but right afterwards. And so throughout that whole process, the deer that are being brought in, when they age the deer by tooth wear, and so that's important. So number one, students actually get to see that, right? They're not, you can age deer by looking at their jaw on a deer that has been harvested, but it's a completely different ball game with a live deer. Especially, they don't like their, when you're looking at their teeth, they don't like you looking at their teeth, right?
Yeah,
and so they'll bite your fingers. They'll, they got their tongue flapping around in there, and so
it'll hurt.
Oh yeah,
you gotta be careful.
Oh yeah, and so it's so obviously our students are hands-on minded, and so they really love it, and it's fun to watch them, and so we have a good time with that, and I think honestly that's probably one our most enjoyable activity we might have in the program. There's lots of other things, but it's students get really excited when they have the deer captures.
Well, and last year we caught 250 deer captured and released, and so it just brings about good camaraderie. You start joking around. It's a very serious tool, and we make sure it's very safe. We go through all the safety protocols, but they understand what the do's and don'ts are, and then you start having fun.
Yeah.
Start ragging with each other, especially when Bob's on the ground. Whenever he finally finds all the bucks and he's on the ground with us, he really jokes and he brings a new life to it.
And they all know that if they're doing a good job and having fun, they're going to get Zeglin's going to have them up in the air afterwards, for rides. And the pilots I use, depending on the students, they get I give them little corrections on what they're going to do in the helicopter when they're flying, and some of it's pretty fun. So we're meshing enjoyment with education,
right?
But by no means are they becoming experienced professionals in the 2 years. We can't.
It's just
you can't do that.
Yeah.
Or the
and
foundation.
it takes years and years.
Yeah.
But it is a good foundation, and the thing I like about this program, more important than any other factor, is by the time you're done with your first semester, daggum good and well whether you want to be a wildlifer or not.
Yeah.
In other words, it could save your parents, and I say parents, a lot of money, because you could go into another degree program that you might like better. But you're going to have the full aspect of wildlife management when you're here. And you're, like Dean said, you're going to get bitten, you're going to get dusty, you're going to get dirty, you're going to rip pants.
Get killed.
You're going to be laughed at. You're going to laugh at others. It's a really fun deal, but it's a learning deal, and it's an introduction to wildlife management at an optimal level that I have not seen occur in any other institution. Not like quite at the magnitude that we do perform here.
Well, we've covered quite a bit of information, and so I think we'll wrap it up now.
Yeah, I mean, our next series will be, the next podcast we'll cover a little more of what goes on in the program.
Well, heck, we just covered the fall semester.
Really?
Yeah.
That's just one semester.
There's some more. We actually.
I
just
definitely
hope
want to
that people
get
enjoy
into.
it.
So in the next episode, I really do want to cover the helicopter and spotlight surveys, and then also the hunter education and hunting 101. The student
Absolutely,
hunt.
that's a huge one.
And so I think, and we'll just to let the viewers and listeners know, more of the viewers, we're going to try and incorporate some of the video into the podcast. That way you can see more or less, and y'all can kind of give us a play-by-play of what's going on in these activities. So,
and one thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up is those of you out there, you youngsters that are interested in wildlife, give these guys a call. We're not trying to advertise to bring you here or anything else, but we could possibly have the ability to change your lifestyle just by the excitement in this program that's generated from all the activities. And so give these guys a call, and if you have questions particularly, just because these guys will answer any question, right or wrong, but they'll answer them. But we'd love to hear from you. We'd like to make this a productive thing for everybody out there of all ages, and we sure appreciate those of you that are at least paying attention and watching us upon occasion.
Yeah,
all right. Well, it looks like that's a wrap for episode 3.
Yeah,
all right, thanks,
kids.
guys. Appreciate
Once
it.
again.